Welcome to the Skillfully podcast. Skillfully is the site with top-class courses for professionals in financial services and other fields, and you're going to find us at skillfully.co.za. Today, we're privileged to be with Nikki McNaught, who is a member of the team at the Business Presentation Group, or BPG, which is a training company that works to unlock people's potential by developing excellent communication skills. And we're proud that Skillfully is featuring a course for which Nikki is a trainer called Present to Influence. Nikki, welcome.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you.
Nikki, I am intrigued that Present to Influence is designed to help you connect from your first breath with the audience. And I personally find that I need longer. I have to work at it. It seems that I need to warm up. People need to warm up. What are some ways that you can use to make that quick connection?
So I think it's important to understand that we've made an impression from the very minute that we walk into the room, the very instant we come online. People are already sizing us up, deciding whether or not this is going to be an interesting person to listen to. So all of those cues come from our body language, the way we present ourselves, so what we look like, how we're dressed, our facial expression, eye contact, warm, engaging smile, even our hand gestures, which might seem weird online, but it's part of often how we communicate. Some people can't communicate without body language, without hand gestures. So it is terribly important to make a connection from the get-go. People tend to like to do business with people they know and with people they can connect with. And we've got almost a split second to do that. Only 7% of our total message is conveyed through the words that we say. The rest comes from our pace, our tone of voice, our body language, facial expression, etc.
Now, Nikki, hands. This is intriguing because if I'm face to face before somebody, I'm not really worried about where my hands are. I sort of trust that they'll do things naturally. But when you were mentioning hands, I thought, gosh, my hands are here. I can move them, but somebody will just see a few fingers waggling along on the bottom. Is this a kind of trick where I try to use them naturally while being aware of my framing in a virtual environment?
So you've just done something right now where you've framed, you used your hands to reinforce the word frame. And that's what we do. That's how we communicate. So being in the virtual world, as most of us have to operate now, it's no different. The only disclaimer possibly that I would put on this is make sure that it's not a distraction, particularly with the lighting and often the background screen. If there's too much movement, your image becomes distorted. So it's being aware of the impression and presence that you're creating in your person, because all of that tells a story without words.
Let's talk a little bit more about the image and the background. I've had people say to me, gosh, I spend so long preparing a PowerPoint, and then in the actual presentation, people don't seem to be watching that much. They seem to be focusing on what I'm saying, and I've spent less time thinking about that. Does that involve getting the balance wrong? Should that kind of person be rethinking what they're doing?
Absolutely, certainly. And it's not unusual for anybody to think, okay, I've now got to design a presentation. So what do? They open PowerPoint and off they go. And the slide deck becomes the central thing, which takes up all focus, energy, and time. And it kind of drives the presentation on the day. So our philosophy is that the visuals or the slides should act as a visual prompt for you, the presenter, but also to help your audience retain information. Less is more when it comes to slides.
Less is more, and that's pretty radical, right? Because you guys go so far as to say, Ditch the slides.
Well, we challenge people on our program to work without spending time on developing a slide deck. Our focus is on what are you trying to say and to whom. So what is the content and the structure of your message? And then how do you deliver it with the most impact? The third element, which is the graphics or the slides, or even the handout, that's merely a support. It is not central. It is merely to support the key message.
Yeah, how interesting. And, I guess if you look back on the great orators and connectors, nobody says, wow, Lincoln's slides and imagery in the Gettysburg Address were just top notch. There was something else going on to make that speech superb.
Yeah.
So let me ask you then about these power tools that BPG mentions, and presumably they exclude slide design. But the idea is that the organization provides this toolbox, appealing idea that will help make your presentations better, for building a persuasive message. Can you tell me a few high points of these power tools?
Certainly. The first one that comes to mind is the presentation briefing pack. And that is a template that we've designed to help a presenter define and understand their audience, their target audience, and that audience's relationship to the information that you as the presenter will be sharing. So it's asking the questions: who should be listening? Who should be hearing this message? Who are the decision makers here? Who are the people that might even have objections or concerns about what I'm going to say? And then lastly, it also helps with the logistics. Where, when, how am I going to present it? What medium? Do I need handouts? And also, what would my slide deck look like to support? The second power tool is the audience thought model, which essentially gets you, the presenter, to think through your audience's thought process, to follow that flow of thought. So typically an audience would sit down and the overwhelming question in their mind is, what's in it for me?
Right.
Why should I sit and listen to this? Why should I give it my attention? We all know that we're all of us, bombarded by avalanches of information. So it's quite a job to cut through the noise and get someone to sit up and listen. So if we can demonstrate the within factor, what's in it for me, quite quickly, we're well positioned. The audience also needs to know that what you're saying is meaningful and relevant to them, that affects their world, that you are demonstrating a level of understanding of, their challenges, what's going on, what's of interest, what they need to know. And then also, we will always get the yes, but thought process, which says, I like what I'm hearing, but how much is this going to cost?
Yes.
Typically.
Yes.
So we need to preempt that, because it could hijack your message if it's not answered.
Yes. Do you find, Nikki, that often people who aren't trained in this will just feel, I've got a message to impart, okay? If it's financial services, maybe it's about a product or service, for example. And I'm going to impart it clearly and in a detailed way, and that will make for a successful presentation, without thinking very much about who they're speaking to.
I think that is what happens. Certainly, we have trained a lot of people that like the one that you've described. And it's all about product or service, and it's all about what we offer, and less about, well, what will it do for the listener, the audience?
Yes.
What need is it meeting? So unless you have defined that and built it into your approach, into the design of your content, then it is just about presenting a product or a service. And your audience might say, well, so what?
So
at
what?
the end of it.
At some level, I suppose, as an audience member, I feel almost like I'm a dispensable widget that can be swapped out for something else if the message is not for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
The person hasn't put themselves in my shoes and done the work of asking, what am I all about? What do I need? What are my interests? What are my worries? I know that BPG is interested in stories, and I guess this is a good point to talk about those because, as I say, I suppose if we keep on the financial services example, it could be a pretty bloodless sort of presentation if that's the way you were going, right? It could just be objective facts and figures. So if that's kind of your business, if that's your field, is there a place to tell stories too? And what would the point be of doing so?
I suppose it's because we need to personalize and make it consumable rather than just presenting a whole lot of facts and figures that leave people saying, so what? How does that affect me? What do you want me to do now?
Yes.
Having heard what you've presented. So storytelling is the most powerful way of getting a message across and engaging your audience, particularly if the story relates to your audience's world. So if it's meaningful, if it's relevant, we often say try and build a storyline through your presentation because that's what will be remembered. Just as a powerful graphic is memorable, we often really do remember things in pictures or in stories. It's how we're wired.
It's so interesting, Nikki. You know, many years ago, I attended a presentation. It was on something to do with mathematics. And although, you know, that's certainly interesting to me, it could have felt needlessly abstract or technical to people in the audience. And the speaker began by telling a story about a boy called Alfonso. What do I remember all those years later? I remember the story of Alfonso. And I have a feeling of warmth and connection in relation to that presentation. I think that presentation might have entirely disappeared from my mind otherwise.
Sure. So there's the example. Absolutely.
Mm, mm. You are a very experienced presenter, and I'm sure some things are an absolute pleasure, and I'm sure occasionally you might gulp or think, here's something challenging coming up. It would be great to know what's the most enjoyable thing about training people to be better presenters, and also whether there's anything that's particularly challenging, whether there's the gulp moment where you think, oh, okay, lot to do here.
So let's start with the gulp moments. The gulp moments are when technology fails you. In this new world in which we live, where it's our reality of how we interact, it's often the default way that we interact. It can really become a curveball that you had not anticipated.
Sure.
And we know of all the other variants like load shedding, bandwidth, poor sound, distractions happening in the background. So for us, I think one of the most challenging times in the story of our business was when we had to ourselves take that quantum leap from being in person, face to face, warm bodies in a room training to the virtual platform. And we had to do it urgently, and we had to do it as we were learning ourselves and as we were helping to navigate or helping our delegates to navigate into that future and establish in a way a new etiquette around meetings, around, you know, keeping the camera on, unmuting yourself, just distilling or putting aside all distractions that might distract your audience or yourself. So how to be very present online, it's more challenging.
It's more challenging, yeah.
Much, yeah. And then the other, but on the opposite side of that, which is always why we love what we do, is watching the progress and the growth of individuals in the room over the period of time that we're with them. And watching watching the sort of tentative, terrified and anxious individual who says, I really hate this, I can't do it, full of ums and ers and stutters and freezing, to a more confident, impactful presence with a real sense that there's a purpose and a meaning behind what they're saying. And watching that happen and careers flourish and develop as a result is really quite uplifting.
That's great, Nikki. And I think one thing that's nice here is the assurance that you can get better not only at the technical aspects of your job, but at the aspect which some people think, look, I'm a natural or I'm not. I'm a born presenter and intimate communicator, or I can't and will never be able to do it. And it sounds like that's just not true. That with the right application and expertise, you can indeed get better. You can get good at this.
Yes, absolutely. Even if you yourselves classify yourself as being an introvert, it's about helping those individuals find their voice and put words, meaningful words, to that voice in a way that's impactful, that's confident. We talk about being connecting and engaging and conversational in terms of style and tone. Yes. And that often makes people feel a little bit less terrified. Imagine it's a conversation.
Imagine it's a conversation. I like that as a kind of final piece of advice. Many thanks, Nikki. And for those listening, please check out the courses on skillfully.co, where they range from financial and general technical skills to human skills, including Present to Influence by BPG. You'll notice I'm using my hands more consciously now and staying in the frame. And there are courses in June and July upcoming for Present to Influence, and you really should register now to reserve your place.